السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Shall I start? Peace be upon you. Hello, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon. I welcome you and I welcome all the participants. Today, we are going to talk about prosecution of war crimes committed in Syria and domestic courts in the Netherlands under the universal jurisdiction. We will have Nessma Bashi. She's a lawyer in the United States and legal officer, Syria Justice and Accountability Center. Nessma, you are welcome. And we welcome Barbara Van Straaten, counsel in Prakken, Oliveira, if I pronounce the name correctly. Martijn Lampe, who is the head of the War Crimes Unit, Netherlands, and it's great to have Mamon Orabi, who is a psychologist in Hope Revival. You are all welcome. Our session today is going to be for an hour and a half, and we will receive your questions after the speakers finish their presentations. I will hand over the microphone to Nessma, who can tell us more about the project. Nessma, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Amer, and thank you to all of the attendees right now for being here today. So as Amer mentioned, my name is Nessma, and I'm a legal officer with the Syria Justice and Accountability Center. I work from SJAC's office in Washington, D.C., but my heart is really with our guests today who are in the Netherlands, because I used to live in the Netherlands, so I miss it a lot. I mean, everything except for the weather I miss. So my heart is with you all today. But I thought that I would start today by telling you a little bit about why we decided to have today's event. So for a few years, police and prosecutors in Europe, they have come to SJAC and they've contacted us when they needed information related to the conflict in Syria. And because of their requests for information, we have been able to contribute to accountability efforts led by European authorities. And these accountability efforts have mostly been focused on identifying and prosecuting individuals who are currently in Europe, but who committed crimes in Syria. And we refer to this process as universal jurisdiction. So you'll hear the term universal jurisdiction a lot, and it's always going to refer to, in our context, the identification and prosecution of individuals who are in Europe now, but who committed crimes in Syria. So at some point, we realized that our role in this sort of accountability work was very reactive, right? We were reacting to the requests for information. But we also really believed at SJAC that we have the resources and the skills to be more proactive and to lead a bit more in these accountability efforts that are related to universal jurisdiction. So last year in October, SJAC started our new project. And the goal of our new project is to build a bridge between the Syrian victims and survivors on one hand, and on the other hand, European prosecutors and other European officials who are investigating the crimes that were committed in Syria. Now, there are a few reasons why we feel really strongly about doing this project. So the first reason is that, of course, bringing these cases in Europe is one of the only avenues that we see right now for judicial accountability in terms of Syrians' opportunities. So because of that, we want to make sure that we are taking every effort to limit the barriers that are currently preventing Syrians from exercising their legal rights under European law. The second reason is that European prosecutors have already expressed to us their willingness and their desire to engage more with Syrians. The problem is that they don't really have the capacity to engage as directly as they would like to with Syrians. And the third reason why we feel strongly about doing this project is because we believe that the activities aimed toward accountability for crimes against Syrians must be led by Syrians. It should be led by you guys who are the victims and the survivors, because you guys have suffered so much, and yet you continue to persevere despite everything that has happened to you. But in But this means that you have to know what your legal rights are, so that way you can exercise those rights as you see fit. So to accomplish this goal, we built our project to have two separate parts. The first part of the project is to give Syrians information on their legal rights and on universal jurisdiction, which Barbara is going to talk about a little bit more in a moment, and she'll talk about it specifically within the context of the Netherlands. And we really want this information to be high quality, and we want it to be accurate, and we want it to be easily accessible. So one thing that we will continue to do is to monitor universal jurisdiction cases. And it's something that we have been doing. The monitoring has been something that we've been doing for a while now. So for example, if you go onto our website, you will find reports on the trial in Koblenz, Germany, against Anwar Ruslan. And those reports are created by members of SJAC's team who went to every single court session. And at each court session, they took very detailed notes by hand on everything that they saw, everything that they heard. And we really insisted on this. We insisted on them going and taking these detailed notes because German courts do not make transcripts of the trial public. So we wanted to make sure that we were helping Syrians get the access that they deserve to these cases, which are so connected to their own experiences. And we're going to do the same thing for the case against Ayla Musa in Frankfurt. So our team will be there at every session, taking these very, very detailed notes, and you'll be able to find our reports in English and Arabic on our website. And aside from just the trial monitoring reports, we will also be working to publish news articles and other information that's crucial to your legal rights, again, in both English and in Arabic on our website and on all of our social media, so that way you have easier access to all of this information. And I think maybe here is a good place to say that if there is ever an issue related to universal jurisdiction or to these cases, or just your legal rights in general in the country that you're in, especially Germany, the Netherlands, or Sweden, if there's anything that you want explained, please tell us, because we can help to clarify the issues. And even if we don't have the answer to your legal questions right now, we'll make sure that we find the right people to answer those questions for you. So you can send us a message on email, via Facebook or Instagram, even on Twitter too. You can call our office in Washington, and I'll make sure that we give you guys all of this information in the chat box in a minute. And a great time to ask questions is also during episodes of our podcast called Adality. And we stream it live on Facebook every other Tuesday. We will have a new episode in 2 weeks because we did one episode this past Tuesday, and all of our episodes are available on the Facebook page, like I said, but also on streaming services wherever you get your podcasts. So at a place like Spotify, you can find our podcast as well. So that's the first part of the project. And of course, the second part of the project, which is really the reason why we're here today, is to connect Syrians with European Union officials in case you want to serve as a witness against a perpetrator who committed a crime in Syria who is in Europe now, or if you want to file a criminal complaint against a perpetrator. And we're not doing this in all countries in Europe. We're focusing specifically on the 3 countries of Germany, the Netherlands, and Sweden. And we chose those 3 countries because we know that they have a particularly large number of Syrians living there. But that's not to say that if you are currently in another country that you should not reach out to us. The opposite is the case. No matter where you are, we are always open for any of your legal questions or whatever it may be. We are happy to provide whatever resources we can to Syrians in Europe across the board. So SJAC, we will be paying for legal services that are provided through our partners under this project. In the Netherlands, we're very lucky to have Barbara, who works for a very renowned law firm called Prakken de Oliveira, who is willing to help us. And you'll hear from Barbara in a minute. She's going to speak after me. And aside from the legal services, we're also going to pay for psychosocial support for individuals who are engaging, who want to engage in these judicial processes through our project, because we are acutely aware of the fact that, you know, engaging with these processes can feel very heavy sometimes, and they can take an emotional toll on people. And Mamon will discuss this a little bit more in a few minutes as well. So with this explanation of our project, I'd like to turn it over to our other speakers who are even better placed than I am to discuss your legal rights in the Netherlands, and also the importance of taking care of yourself through psychosocial support while engaging in these processes. And thank you again for being here. Thank you, Amer.
Thank you so much, Nessma, for this great introduction. I give the microphone now to Barbara, who will, you know, tell us about the universal jurisdiction in the Netherlands and the opportunities of the victims and the survivors in front of the judicial mechanisms. The floor is yours, Barbara.
Thank you, Amer. I was just waiting for the translation. I will share my screen because I have a short PowerPoint presentation prepared as well. I hope this technique works. Everyone can see it? Yeah, good. So thank you so much for having me today. And I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to tell you more about victims' rights, basically, in the Netherlands. I saw that Martijn was also on the program, who is very specialized in the investigation and prosecution part of war crimes. So I hope my story won't overlap too much, but I will focus specifically on the rights that you have when you want to file a complaint, or when you're considering to file a complaint or undertake action in the Netherlands. As Nessma already said, my name is Barbara van Straaten. I'm a criminal defense lawyer specializing also specifically in victims assistance, victims of crime, domestic crime, but also international criminal offenses. And I work at the law firm Prakken de Oliveira. You can see the name here. So very briefly, because I think Nessma also explained it very well, and I am sure that Martijn will also say one or two things about it. But indeed, when we're talking about prosecuting war crimes, we're talking about war crimes, but we're also talking about crimes against humanity. Those are two larger international crimes that are both applying to the situation in Syria and the acts that have occurred there. And just to put it in more plain language, because this is all very legal language, you're talking about very serious crimes. So you're talking about murder, torture, forced disappearances, looting, putting fire to houses, rape. And indeed, all these crimes, although they have been committed in Syria, so on another territory, they can still be prosecuted here in the Netherlands. So the people who are suspect of that can still be held accountable, even though we're talking about a completely different country, the Netherlands, here in Europe. And that's what we call universal jurisdiction. Because as an international community, we agreed, and the Netherlands as one of the countries, we agreed that some crimes are so severe, so serious, that we think these people who commit those crimes need to be prosecuted, even though if it's in our country and the facts were committed somewhere else. And so it's only for the most serious crimes, but most of the things that happened in Syria will qualify for that. So you will be able to file a complaint for those crimes in the Netherlands. What's very important in practice is that the prosecution services will only start an investigation if there is indications that the suspect so the person who is suspected of those crimes, is present in the Netherlands. And that has everything to do with the fact that, of course, these investigations are very large. So there's a lot of people working on it. The police takes it extremely seriously if they find someone like that. But they will put a lot of persons on it and a lot of money. And that's why they only invest in cases like this when they know that there's actually the person is in the Netherlands and they have an opportunity to catch him or her. But if that's the case, you can be quite serious, and I'm sure Martijn will also say something about that they will take those cases very seriously and that they will put those resources in it. But that's something that's important for you to remember if you're considering filing a complaint. One of the first things the police will do is ask, do you know where the defendant or the suspect is? If they are in the Netherlands, we can go ahead. Then the second question, and now I will focus more on the victims part. Who can file a complaint? Well, of course, the victims, direct victims, so people who these crimes happened to or who were present when crimes were committed. But actually, anyone who knows about a crime can file a complaint. So even if you have it secondhand, so someone told you about crimes that happened in Syria and you know that that person is currently in the Netherlands, even though you were not present yourself, you can still file that complaint and the police will probably start an investigation and try to verify that story. So as long as you have knowledge, a certain knowledge about crimes being committed, you can go to the police and file a complaint or explain to them what happened, even though if those crimes were not directly committed against you. Then how do you do that? So there is basically 3 options. One is that you go directly to the police. So you basically walk into a police station and you say, hello, my name is, well, your name. And I am aware of a crime that was committed in Syria and it's very seriously. And I know that the person who did it is now in the Netherlands and I want to file a complaint. That's the first option. What is a bit difficult about it is that those police officers will not be very specialized. So they will hopefully call the team of Martijn. But if you have any difficulties with that, or you think, well, I need more information, then there's 2 other options. The second option is that you directly contact the team of Martijn, and I'm sure he will give you his contact details because they are a team from the police that is specialized in investigating international crimes. Or, which is also a very good idea, is that you ask the help of a lawyer. So for example, me, but it can be any lawyer in the Netherlands. What's maybe nice about a lawyer is if you have questions beforehand. For example, what are your rights? Or if you are afraid, or if you have other questions and you're not certain whether you want to really do this, you can go to a lawyer and discuss it with them. Which brings me to the next point. What are your rights as a victim? Well, the first is if you are a direct victim, you probably in these cases have the right to access to a free lawyer. And that means that there are some lawyers in the Netherlands, like myself, who are specialized in victims assistance. Most lawyers, if they have that specialization, they will put it on their website so that you know, oh, these people are specialized in victims assistance. So they have followed special training and they know everything about victims' rights and they have experience with these cases, so they can help you. And if they have that specialization, you will often get free access to that lawyer. Sometimes it's a bit complicated in practice. Sometimes the first part of the case, for example, if you want advice, it's not for free, but then as Nessma explained, SJAC can help out. So don't be afraid about the cost because SJAC will always help out, but it's important that you know that lawyers are here in the Netherlands, specially trained for these cases, and that they can help you. Another very important right that you have if there's going to be a prosecution. So, for example, you filed a complaint and there's indeed someone is caught and the prosecutor says, well, we have enough evidence. We want to bring this person before the court and have a prosecution and have a jail sentence for him. Then you can have access to the case file, which means that you can see what evidence there is against this person. You can see what witnesses there were, and you can sometimes it helps for the recovery of yourself. It helps to understand what exactly happened and how the story has come together. And maybe you're not the only person. Often in these cases, there are a lot of victims. So that can help for a better understanding. So that's a very important right. Another important right is that you have the right to ask for compensation of the harm that was done to you. And that can be material costs, for example, if you lost your home, or if you have any losses in money or property. But it is also compensation for what we call immaterial loss. So for the hurt, for the pain that you have suffered, for the fact that you maybe had to leave your country, for maybe you have lost relatives or people around you have been hurt. And you can also ask for compensation for that from the defendant. And what's also very important to know is that even if the defendant is not able to pay you because he doesn't have enough money, or she, then there is an arrangement that the Dutch state can pay that compensation to you. So this is again something that you can, that is why it's very important that if you go this far, please consult a lawyer, because they can help you with that. They can fill out the forms, they can explain this better to you, and also explain how you should submit those claims. But this is something that you have the right to do. And then maybe the most important, I think most of my clients think this is the most important right, is that you have the right to address the court. Again, this is if there is indeed a successful investigation and the police thinks and the prosecutor thinks there's enough evidence, so we're going to bring someone to trial. And then during the trial, sorry, I will slow down a bit as well. During the trial, you can speak to the judges, and you can explain to the judges what happened to you and why you think it is so important that these people are being tried, even if it's in the Netherlands. And you can even explain to the judges what you think the sentence should be. And it doesn't mean that that sentence will indeed be applied, but at least you can have the right, you have the chance, the opportunity to explain to them what this did to you and how it affected you. And for many people, that's a very important right, because it's your moment to be present in court and explain that. And most of these rights, not everything, but also apply to relatives of deceased persons. So if you have a very narrow family member, for example, your parents or children or your spouse, you also have, or a brother or sister, you also have the right to address the court, for example. So that's also something that's important to know. Then already my last slide. There are a few things maybe to consider if you're thinking about filing a complaint. One is that your name will be in the case file. So if you're very scared, or if you don't want anyone to know that you filed a complaint, this is something that you should consider. Again, if you are afraid, or if you are now thinking maybe I should not do it, please contact a lawyer, because there's protection measures that can be taken. So lawyers can explain to you what you can do to minimize the risks. For example, you can choose as your address, because if you file a complaint, you have to give an address. You can choose as your address the police station, or you can choose your lawyer's office. So these are very simple measures that can help you to improve your feeling of security. And what you should also consider, if you're filing a complaint, there's always the possibility that you will be heard as a witness. And it can be a witness with the police, but also as a witness with the judge in the court. And luckily, in the Netherlands, witnesses are almost never heard in a public court. Very often they are heard with the investigative judge, which means that it's a very small room where there's no audience. It's just the judge, the prosecutor, the defendant's lawyers, and your own lawyer. You can bring your lawyer there as well. So it's a very secure place. So don't be afraid of what you see on the television of the American practices, where witnesses are completely questioned by the opposing counsel. That's not happening in the Netherlands. It's a very secure place, and the investigative judge will make sure that your rights are properly secured. These are my contact details. Feel free to send me an email, to call me, even if you just have one question. That's always a possibility, as Nessma explained, and I would be very happy and honored to help you. And I will go back to the presentation.
Thank you very much indeed, Barbara, for the great presentation. A question addressed to Martijn Lampe, after welcoming you, of course. What's your experience in dealing with the most serious international crimes and prosecution thereof in the Netherlands? Can you give us an overview about your experience in this regard? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. I will answer the question in a minute. Please just allow me to introduce myself to you first. My name is indeed Martijn Lampe. I'm a detective inspector at the Dutch International Crimes Unit. And first of all, I would like to say thank you very much for having me today. I'm very honored to be here. I'm looking forward to a fruitful meeting with all of you. Just a short introduction for my unit as well. Barbara explained already a lot about international jurisdiction. It's true. We can only investigate crimes when there's a strong Dutch link. For most Syrian cases, indeed, that link is when the perpetrator is in the Netherlands. We can also investigate if the suspect is Dutch. So if someone is holding the Dutch nationality but is not in the Netherlands, we can also start investigating. Or if there was a victim who was Dutch at the time of the crime. Another thing that is, I think, important to note here, because there is some discussion sometimes about universal jurisdiction. The Netherlands has limited universal jurisdiction. That is because of the Dutch link that needs to be there. This is a little bit different for other large countries in Europe. For example, France and Germany have universal jurisdiction. So what you sometimes hear in the media is that France, Germany, or other countries with universal jurisdiction are conducting what we call structural investigations. They have the jurisdiction to investigate crimes committed in Syria within, for example, prison systems, without even having a suspect or something within their borders. So that's not something that the Netherlands can do. So yes, we receive a lot of allegations in our units, and a lot of them relate to the Syrian conflict. The allegations differ from quality. Sometimes we receive an allegation with a picture of a man sitting in a chair holding a gun. This guy, he belonged to this and that unit, and they did terrible things. Sometimes we receive well-written reports based on eyewitness accounts. Unfortunately, sometimes we've also received allegations that prove to be false, leaving us guessing to the motive, or if it was even premeditated to do so. So for a successful prosecution in the Netherlands, it's necessary to present solid evidence. Evidence that is the result of an investigation that was conducted in accordance with the highest international standards. The Dutch court can only convict someone when it's presented with lawful and convincing evidence. So investigations necessary for this needs dedicated professionals and also time. International crimes are usually difficult to prove, and building cases can often be very complex and time-consuming. That means that the number of investigations that can be conducted at the same time is limited. So it's very important to choose what case to investigate. So it's also very important to have preliminary investigations. one allegation doesn't make a case. Further investigation is necessary, and we want to gather evidence that can shed light on what happened and what part the accused played in it, if any at all. So we identify and follow up on potential leads. One of the things we're doing is identifying, reaching out and interviewing witnesses. Witness statements are still the most important pieces of evidence in international crimes trials. Without witness statements, it's very difficult to build a solid case. But there are many challenges. One of them is the security of the witness and the family of the witness. If you become a witness, Barbara also mentioned this, your name will become known to the defense counsel and to the suspect. And not every witness can provide testimony without serious security concerns. We take the safety of the witnesses very seriously. We do not want to go to trial while this puts the witness or the family of the witness in extreme danger. There are options available to provide a witness statement anonymously or even in extreme circumstances with protective measures. Barbara also pointed this out. You can discuss this with a lawyer. You can also discuss this with me or my team or the investigators who are in touch with you if you are a witness. However, an anonymous testimony doesn't carry as much weight as a normal testimony. So to build a case solely on anonymous witnesses is something that would not easily stand in court. So yes, the question was to my perspective on international crimes and the way it affected me. For me, I've been at this unit for over 10 years, and I've been investigating a large number of conflicts, and I've been dealing with many victims, witnesses, also perpetrators. And I can say that, and Barbara also said it, that we in the Netherlands, we do consider these crimes as the most serious crimes. And I can only say that after having spoken with so many witnesses and victims of these crimes, I can only agree that the impact of these crimes are huge, and the need for accountability is very great. It's very important, but also difficult at the same time. I've also had to drop sometimes a case because we couldn't get the evidence. It wasn't possible to go to trial based on the evidence we were able to gather, and this is very painful. But it's also how the system works. Fortunately, we're also able to go to trial with a couple of cases that I worked on, and we were able to present it solid cases. And I mean, I was very happy that I was able to contribute a little bit to the accountability in those cases. Yeah, I hope that was an answer to your first question. If there are other questions, I'm very happy to answer them as well.
Thank you very much indeed, Martijn. Of course, it was a thorough explanation and answer. Thank you very much. We do appreciate your efforts that you're doing as part of your unit. Thank you very much indeed, wholeheartedly. Now I give the floor to Mamon. Would like to welcome you, Mamon. So I'd like to ask you about the following. The psychological state of the victims and witnesses. Can you tell us about something psychological welfare and their situation after the trauma or shock. The floor is yours. Thank you very much indeed, sir. Thank you, Amer. Thank you, Barbara, Martijn. Thank you, Nessma, as well, for what they have presented. I'm Mamon Orabi from Syria, from Eastern Ghouta, near Damascus. Currently, I'm residing in the northern part of Syria, and I also teach at the university at the psychology department. I'm also a psychologist and specialist who deals with certain cases in collaboration with some psychiatrists.
This is a very, very important topic and very deep emotionally. We need to pay attention to it. I need to start with a small example that happened a while ago. I was doing a training. I was a trainer with a German group, and this training was two parts, introductory and advanced. We finished the introductory part, and if you want to move to the advanced part, you need to fulfill certain criteria. If you don't, you will lose the advanced training. So we were discussing, and the German doctor asked me, she said, what do you think of X person? Can he move to the second part of the training? I felt this question was really embarrassing for me, was very embarrassing. I felt that I was a witness, that I want to give a testimony against a person who is not a criminal. He has not committed a crime. He only wants to move from one level to another level in the training. So I just, remembered what you're saying. So imagine if it was a witness who will testify on a crime. Imagine how or how big the burden is on this witness. The witness is a person who was under a trauma, and this trauma comes in different degrees, and he tried to forget this trauma. He, tried to, maybe he left Syria. He wants to forget this trauma. Now, if we ask him to testify again, as if we re-traumatize the guy or make him feel the trauma again. So if we summon the witness, even before they testify, there was a trauma. If you ask them to come and testify, there is another trauma. So they will have certain emotions, certain feelings, certain perceptions. The perceptions are things that they saw, things they heard, things they smelled, things they tasted. I am speaking to you as a specialist and as a person who experienced many things when I was in Ghouta. I am a former prisoner. There are things that I saw in prison. So far, I can remember them. There are voices I heard, screams that I have never heard in my life. They cause me some stress, some trauma. So testimony is like the people who spoke before me. This is really stressful. This puts a lot of burden, a lot of pain. This pain that we experience when we are summoned for a testimony is related to several factors. First, the type of the trauma. Was he subject to this trauma personally? Because, for example, I was displaced, I was raped, I was beaten, I was so and so. This is more severe than seeing a person experience these traumas. And this person I saw, is he a relative or not a relative? So how affected I am depends on the relationship and the ties. And did I see or hear? So the senses we use and the type of the perpetrator. So if I talk about a person who displaced, who killed, who raped, and he's a serious criminal, he is controlling a country, and he is the person who inflicted this harm on this country. So imagine how severe the trauma is. And it's also related to the type of the crime. If I testify against a misdemeanor, maybe those in the judiciary will know it's different from testifying against a crime, a murder. This puts you under stress, and sometimes stress is even further when we talk about the PTSD. The PTSD is a person who, experienced a trauma, and this trauma caused him, mental issues, concentration issues, insomnia, nightmares, anxiety, and some people who have PTSD might be irritated very easily. And the symptoms the person face, if you summon them for, to testify, they will feel guilt. If I see things in the detention, and if I was the only survivor, I will feel that it is my fault. Why me? This happens to the detainees who were subject to violence, and it happens to soldiers. After the Second World War, people faced the same PTSD. Why was I the only survivor? Because there was a bomb. Why I was the only survivor? Sometimes he will hold himself or herself accountable for the death of their colleagues and fellow fighters. And in psychology, we have judicial psychology. We study the elements of the court, the elements of the judge, the elements of the lawyers, the elements of the witnesses. So we talk about the stress and the trauma on the witness. There are other symptoms, physical symptoms, pain, and the harm that was inflicted on the body. Now, for therapy varies according to how severe the symptoms are. People can overcome many symptoms and trauma, but he might need psychosocial support from the family members, from the friends, from the neighbors. So if he is listened to, this is kind of treatment or therapy. There is the coming back to here and now. People who are under trauma, they always see what happened to them. So we want to bring them here and now. Sometimes they can even smell the smell of the bombing, the strikes, the airstrikes. In Syria, we still hear, smell, and imagine what happened. People who are killed. There was a building, an existing building, and now it's leveled to the ground. So this brings me back to the past. So we should bring them to here and now. We should live here and now. So you live this experience, this trauma, but now you are here. Going back to work, going back to business, sport, meditation. These are all preliminary treatments. But if it goes to the PTSD, here we might need a specialized treatment. We have the cognitive behavior treatment and the EMDR by the eye movement. And there are certain cases that need collective therapy. The collective therapy, it's a group of people who receive similar trauma, and every person talks about his or her own experience. So it's a group therapy. When a similar person received a certain trauma, a similar trauma, they will, humor me. They understand me, I understand them. So When we have the group therapy, we have some empathy, we sympathize, and we listen to each other. And in certain cases, we might need some psychiatrists to help if we needed medication. So I wanted to sum it by talking about the symptoms and how the witness is summoned all of a sudden, and this needs some, paving the way. Barbara mentioned something important. Some witnesses would apologize because their name will be mentioned, will be in public, because as we know, we deal with criminals who have, cronies everywhere. If I am in the Netherlands, if I'm in Sweden, in Germany, if I am a witness, I will be scared because I know this criminal has cronies in Sweden, has people affiliated to him in Sweden. So if my name is not mentioned, if I remain anonymous, I can go and testify without any fear. Thank you for your work. Thank you, Mamon. Thank you for your work. You did a good job. Nessma, I have a question for you from lawyer Mahmoud Uthman. Detention and torture with symptoms on the body of the victim, is this a good evidence to file a case against the regime, even if this happened in 2007, like well before the revolution?
So I'm actually going to focus that question on
sorry, let me switch.
You're okay. I'm actually going to focus that question maybe to Martijn. I think that he'll have a better insight as to whether a case like that dating from before 2011 has good prospects before a Dutch court.
Thank you very much, Nessma. That depends a little bit, and perhaps also Barbara can explain a little bit about this. But in 2007, there was not an armed conflict, so we were not able to prosecute those crimes as war crimes. Was there a situation of crimes against humanity? That remains to be seen. I don't think that there was at this time, but perhaps some scholars can be convinced otherwise. I'm happy to. I'm open to that. But the Dutch law has the possibility to prosecute torture. Torture as when torture was committed by government employees or on behest of government employees. So it depends a little bit on what happened and the context in which those crimes were committed. To give you a straight answer, it's difficult. The answer is what exactly happened, who were involved, and then when we know those details, we can assess whether or not the crimes can be prosecuted in the Netherlands. If you are familiar with such a case, I would advise you to get in touch with me or my team, or with the team of Barbara, and then we can look into the details.
One thing I'll add to that is I think this is a good time to remember when exactly the international law considers the conflict in Syria. When did it become an armed conflict? And I think it's a hard question for a lot of Syrians to answer, because from the very beginning, from when the revolution started, we saw violence from the beginning. And so for us, we have to wonder, like, okay, did the violence we see at the beginning, should that be considered a war crime or a crime against humanity? And as tempting as it is to say, yes, it is, the reality is that under international law, we generally consider it to be around 2012, with the way that the conflict shifted toward being an armed conflict. That's the time when usually the crimes are triable under international law. So I hope that helps clarify. And I know that it seems a little bit unfair, But unfortunately, international law is not always fair and doesn't always account for the totality of the crimes that have been committed.
Nessma, may I add a little bit to that? You're absolutely right. However, we consider the situation from March 2011 as crimes against humanity. So some crimes we can prosecute. Dutch court has established an armed conflict in Syria, indeed, from early 2012. And the IIIM, the body of the United Nations investigating the situation in Syria, has made a compelling argument that the armed conflict was at the end of 2011 already in place. This has not been to a court as far as I know.
شكرا سيد مارتن.
Thank you, Martin. Another question, if I may. Martin talked about the need of evidence. What do you mean by evidence? What do you mean by evidence against the perpetrator? If the perpetrator is in the Netherlands and the crime was committed, several years ago, and how many witnesses do we have in order to be able to file a complaint or a case?
Well, to file a complaint, you can always file a complaint, even if there's just only one witness. Then it's up to us to see if we can find any other leads or to try to build a case. Your question is, when is it enough to have a solid trial? If you have, when is it enough to have a successful trial? In the Netherlands, the only way for a court to convict you if if the evidence is lawfully and convincing. Down to basically, if you have two pieces of evidence, say 2 witness statements, and the court is convinced that the accused is guilty of the crime, then it should be enough for a conviction. But that's the bare minimum, 2 pieces of evidence.
شكرا مجددا سيد مارتن.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. A question for Nessma. A person asks, is there a possibility to document the victim without having the accused in order to use this documentation of this person in the future without having the accused on the territories of the country that will prosecute him?
Yeah, so thank you for asking this question. I think this is an important question to ask, because at SJAC we have been collecting these witness statements for many years now, in fact almost 10-11 years. So at SJAC, if you approach us and you want to give us a witness statement, we are more than happy to collect it and to store that information within our database for future prosecution purposes. Now, in terms of what that means for accountability now, right, we would need the perpetrator to be in Europe. But so this would be hopefully for something in the long term. But again, if you are interested in providing any sort of testimony to us, then we are happy to talk with you to find out a little bit more. Thank you.
تمام. سائل يسأل بنفس السؤال لكن
another question which is quite similar, but actually it is specifically in the Netherlands. Can we document or lodge witness testimony without the suspect being in the Netherlands? The victim is already in the Netherlands, but the perpetrator is outside the country. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll say the same thing here applies. We are more than happy at SJAC to collect your testimony and whatever other information that you may have on the crime. Now, does that mean that we can go forward with actual accountability efforts? Not necessarily, right? We would prefer if the perpetrator is somewhere in Europe where we can identify their location and where we can contact the relevant authorities. But again, we are more than happy to collect your testimony for future purposes.
تمام أشكرك أنسة نسمة.
Thank you very much, Nessma, for that answer indeed. So Martijn, another question, please, addressed to you. Witness protection and measures and mechanisms. What can you tell us about that? Witness protection measures and mechanisms.
Well, the first and most important thing to keep witnesses safe is having the statement anonymously. That I think would provide the most security for the witness. But that's not always possible. You can imagine that for a witness providing statement, the details from the statement will reveal the identity of the witness. In those cases, anonymity would not be enough to protect the witness. So the only way to protect the witness in such a case when testimony is provided is to take serious protective measures, and there are possibilities to do so. However, they are really intense, and they're really demanding also on the part of for the witnesses involved. So to take such a step, it's a very we will take steps if absolutely necessary and if possible for the witness involved, but it needs to be like the very important piece of evidence to close the case. Because it's, like I said, it's very intensive I'm talking here about witness protection programs, and that's, of course, I cannot go into details of how they work, but I can tell you that they're very demanding for the witnesses and the family as well. So to take such a step, it needs to be very important to do so, and it needs to be possible to do so.
If I can just step in, because I saw that there was a question directed at me which is related to this topic, and indeed it's a very good point. I did not mention that, but when you give a statement or when you file a complaint, what you basically also do is that you give the case out of your hands, which means that then the evidence is with the police, and they from then on will decide together with the prosecutor on whether or not they will follow up on the case. And that means that if you later change your mind and you want to withdraw your statement, that's not possible. So that means that you can also be summoned as a witness, as I explained with the investigative judge. And if you then don't want to answer questions, they can actually then, that's a very extreme case, hardly happens, but they can actually then take measures, for instance, take you hostage to force you to give the evidence that you know. So again, if you are doubting on whether to do this, or you want to first have explained all your rights, it's a very good thing to first consult a lawyer before contacting the police. I'm sure that Martijn's team is also going to explain this to you, but just be aware that once you give that evidence, it's out of your hands and you don't have control over it anymore.
شكرا سيدة باربارا.
Thank you, Barbara, indeed. Another question addressed to Nessma. Can the judicial authorities in the Netherlands document the testimonies of victims who are asylum seekers? And I'm not here referring to any private entities, and this is addressed to Martijn, I guess.
The question is whether or not we can take testimony from people who are seeking refuge in the Netherlands. Yes, we can.
نعم حتى ولو يكون هذا يعني حتى هذا الشخص
even if this person is still in the camp because an asylum seeker and not regularly documented, would the testimony still counts?
Yes, the testimony will still count. We as a police, we're not your legal status in the Netherlands does not influence the credibility as a witness, and you are able to provide testimony in a case such as this. Yeah, it's possible.
طيب ممكن
Thank
سؤال.
you. Another question to Barbara. Can the victim report or a complaint about someone, although the whereabouts of this perpetrator are not known, but can provide all the details, and therefore, if they provide the necessary information, can that perpetrator's name be listed on the most wanted list?
I think it's more a question for Martijn. So as I explained, in general, the general rule is basically that the police will not start investigations if the suspect is not present in the Netherlands. Of course, if you have very clear indications that someone will come to the Netherlands, sometimes we have that. We know that people come to the Netherlands in whatever capacity, but you have to be sure, then you can warn the police in advance and they may pick up the case. Most wanted list, I don't think we have that under the Dutch national system. You do have that for the international courts, for example, but Syria is not under the jurisdiction of the international court. But Martijn, please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I think that you're right. And also given our jurisdiction and the presence that needs to be there of the accused in the Netherlands, it makes it that we only follow up and when they're here. There are of course options to send out arrest warrants. We have done so, for example, for our people who left the Netherlands to join ISIS, for example. They're not in the Netherlands, but we send out arrest warrants for them. It's not on a most wanted list, but then when they are seized by police somewhere else, then we have an arrest warrant outstanding.
Thank you, Martijn. Indeed. Nessma, another question that just arrived in case any investigator or torturers or prison wardens who were present when I was detained, how would I know that there is another person to step forward as a witness? Would my single testimony suffice? And what are the required pieces of evidence besides my testimony? Because now there are no more any marks of the torture, be they, I mean the bodily marks, but of course the psychological trauma is still there.
Yeah, this is a wonderful question, and again, I'm gonna field it to Martijn. I think he's best placed to answer.
Thank you very much. Indeed, a very, very good question. I think it's very helpful to provide your information to my unit, my team. We already store a number of this kind of allegations, only from one source, one individual, one victim. You have to also take into consideration that there's no statute of limitation on these crimes. So we store all the allegations and accusations, and somewhere along the road there might be somebody else, or there might be some other piece of evidence which together with your information does make a case, and in that case, and then we can follow up, and then perhaps it's a solid case that we can present to trial. Also, because of the number of allegations and information that we have stored in the past, we were able to also assist structural investigations conducted by other countries, for example, who are structurally investigating crimes committed within a number of detention centers in Syria, for example. So you don't need to build a case yourself. You can provide the information to us. We try to build a case. I can't promise you that we are able to build a case or that we can follow up on everything. I mean, but as long as you store your information with us, if you notify us what you witnessed, what you saw, and then we store it properly, we keep it with us and have it ready for when other information or piece of evidence become available to pursue any further.
سؤال آخر للسيدة نسمة.
Another question addressed, thank you, Martijn, of course. Another question addressed to Nessma. The International Criminal Court, why didn't they place the name of the criminal Bashar al-Assad on the most wanted list? Thank you.
This is a great question, and I think we all wish that we had a better answer to it. So there are a couple of reasons why the ICC cannot take any case against Syria. The first reason is that Syria is not what we call a state party to the Rome Statute. All that means is that the agreement between the countries who are part of the court, who are part of the International Criminal Court, Syria is not one of those countries. And so if the country where the crime is being committed is not part of the court, then really the other way that a case can go before the ICC is through the Security Council of the United Nations. So that means that the Security Council has to say, okay, we see that these crimes have been committed, or we think that crimes have been committed, and so we would like to refer the situation to the prosecutor of the ICC for them to investigate deeper. Well, the issue there is who is on the Security Council right now. We know that Russia is on the Security Council. So realistically, our chances for having an investigation at the ICC based on a Security Council referral is non-existent. So it's very frustrating. I worked at the ICC, and I remember being there and seeing the cases come forward and feeling like it just is so wrong that we can't bring a case on Syria, especially against Assad. But unfortunately, this is the parameters for bringing the main parameters for bringing a case before the ICC when it comes to Syria. Now, one thing I'll mention is that over the past 2 or 3 years, there has been some developments in terms of ICC precedents. So essentially, the court has said that if a crime happened in a country that is a state party to the Rome Statute, so let's say in Jordan, for example, Jordan is a state party to the court, but that part of the crime happened in a state that is not part of the ICC, so like Syria, then there's potential for a case to move forward. So there was a case that was recently submitted, well, about 2 years ago, I should say, a case that was submitted that pertains to refugees at the border between Jordan and Syria. The problem is that there has not been much movement on that case, and with the way that the office of the prosecutor is looking at cases lately, I'm not sure when we will be hearing more news on that.
Thank you for your answer, indeed. A question addressed to Barbara. In a case in Germany, a witness gave his deposition, then he became a suspect because of his deposition and because of his testimony. We do know that many of the newcomers are not well educated about the legal issues, but they still might have important information. So how do you deal with such cases and make the trade-off between the importance of the data / evidence and achieving justice? Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. This is an excellent question. Very good question. Good point. There's two points basically in the question. So the first part is where this person became a defendant himself, a suspect himself. That is sometimes a risk, and this is again why it's good to consult a lawyer beforehand, because a lawyer works for you and for you only, which means that they only have your interest at heart, and that's a difference from the police, who have to do an objective investigation, so they have to look at the bigger picture. So if you have any questions or doubts about that, please first go to a lawyer, because they will take your interest at heart. And if they see a risk, they will tell you, well, maybe it's very harsh, but maybe not file it, or try to give that evidence to the police in a different way. And they can help you with that. The second part is also a very good point. I don't think I can answer it in full, but what is a risk always in these cases is that even if you're not considered a suspect yourself in a criminal investigation, indeed the IND, which is the Dutch Immigration Service, may still think that there is enough grounds, enough reason to think that you have been involved with war crimes, so that you had some role which is against a specific clause of the International Refugee Convention, which is called 1F, basically. And that happens sometimes. Even people who have been acquitted in criminal cases can still be considered get a 1F status under that convention, and that often means that they lose their Dutch resident status or their nationality even, and that they have to leave the country. In Syria, that's extremely difficult, of course, because they can't return to their own country. But this is a very real risk for some people. So again, contact lawyers. For instance, my firm also has a lot of immigration lawyers who specialize in 1F cases, so we would be able to advise you on that. I'm not completely sure what the information exchange is between the police and the IND. I know that the War Crimes Unit receives information sometimes from the IND, and that they start cases on the basis of IND information. I don't know whether it also works the other way around, so whether the police shares information with the IND. Maybe Martijn can explain that.
Thank you indeed for this clear answer. A question addressed to Martijn. What about the statements and testimony? Are they completely separated between the police and the IND and the IRVD? And when do they share such statements, information, data, etc.? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's a very good question, and it's yes, in the past the 1F files were shared with the Public Prosecutor's Office, but we have new laws in place, and we need to find we need to see what the implications of these new laws are on this proceedings. There is not the information stored with the police is not automatically all shared with immigration services, although we do in some instances, some cases have also the obligation to inform the immigration service when we receive information that's crucial for them to do their work properly. Yeah, but there's not an open sharing of information from the police units to the immigration services.
Thank you. Another question as well. What can we do vis-a-vis the detainees and the victims of forced disappearances? Can we bring the matter to the Dutch Parliament?
Can we prosecute for forced disappearances? Yes, we can. That's a criminal offense.
Just like what happened with Caesar's Act in the United States, you know, with those pictures and photos of victims that were leaked, and also the mass graves that were leaked. So could you bring this to the attention of the Dutch Parliament as well? That was the last part of the question.
Oh, to the attention of the Dutch Parliament. Okay. We are very well aware of the Caesar pictures and footages, and also already in Dutch Parliament, it's widely known.
One thing I can add to that is, you know, SJAC, part of what we do is we document the violations, right? And so we have a lot of information that was given to us in terms of missing persons that related to Daesh, for example, and that might relate to missing persons. We're also asking the US government, for example, for documents that we think that they might have that relate to missing persons. So any information that you think that you have, whether it's pictures, videos, or whatever, that's all information that we would happily store in our database and are happy to talk to you about to figure out if there's a way for us to help, you know, find missing loved ones if it's possible.
شكرا لكم.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer, Mr. Mamon. We're back to you. How is the best way to deal with the witness when we collect their testimony and we cause them trauma if they started crying? How do we deal with them? Thank you. This is a very relevant question. During testimony, sometimes you try to recall everything, and when you recall everything, you recall the emotions, the stress, the trauma, the sadness, and anxiety. So the severity of these symptoms and emotions would lead to they get emotional, and this prevents them from speaking. This might put them in a very difficult psychological status in such an emotional situation. And this is something we educate judges. They need to learn about judicial psychology. Sometimes they need to give them a break. They need to stop talking. Sometimes they need to breathe in, breathe out, take a break. After they take a break, if they can carry on, they can carry on. But if they can't, we should give them a chance to come in a different session, a different hearing. So it would be a big mistake if we insist that they should carry on with their testimony. So we need to give them a break. If they could not proceed, we can ask them to come in a different session. Thank you, Mamon. A question for Nessma. What about holding Russia and Iran accountable? If Bashar al-Assad was to be tried at court, can we also hold Russia and Iran accountable? Because they are supporters for Bashar, as you know.
في الإجرام والقتل يعني.
They are, partners in the crime.
Yeah, this is a great question, again, because it shows just how diverse the parties to the conflict are in Syria. Unfortunately, the same policy applies for Russia and Iran when it comes to the International Criminal Court. Neither country is a party to the court, and so because of that, we can't actually bring them to the court. The other issue, of course, is, are we able to get perpetrators who are maybe Russian or Iranian to the European Union? So again, it's the same requirement of the perpetrator being on Dutch soil would be required for these crimes as well. So unfortunately, again, in terms of international criminal law and at the ICC, the prospects are not there right now.
شكرا كثير أنسة نسمة.
Thank you so much, Nessma. A question for Mamon. What advice do you have for refugees in those countries and their need for psychosocial support? This is a very relevant question. As we know, we work with associations in Germany and in other countries. Honestly, one very important point is IASC pyramid in psychosocial support. That says many people, having them in a supportive environment with their relatives, friends, their surrounding, the neighborhood, this is a very good support for them. This is a very good support. And those centers in those countries provide some programs like the BM Plus program, and he said it in English. This is applied in Syria and in other countries for people who are under a lot of stress. So having psychosocial support, that's why we call it psychosocial, not only psychological, but it's psychosocial, to be in an environment where you have beloved ones, the loved ones who who listen to you because we share the same concern. So talking to them and venting, work, we always tell the people who have stress and anxiety, staying at home would exacerbate the situation. So go out, work, do something, do sport, exercise, pay attention to your food, to your health. This will help. So this is my advice to all those people outside Syria. Even if we were in Syria, but we are displaced, I personally, you know, being among friends and relatives would help support me, would help, you know, provide me with comfort. I lost my house, I lost my neighborhood, I lost friends. So being among some relatives and friends will comfort me. Now, if my professional life, my family life, and my work have been disrupted, we need to go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist to help us. We need to seek help and support. Thank you. At the end, I would like to thank everybody. I would like to thank the participants. I hope we were light on you. Thank you, Martijn. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Nessma. Thank you, Mamon, from the bottom of our heart. And we thank the both interpreters. Thank you so much. You did a great job. And I hope we can see you all in future seminars or webinars. Thank you again. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
مساء الخير.